Hi, and welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, with days looming, we don't have a state budget, and could we be all summer without a state budget? To discuss that, we have some of the state's leading business representatives, as well as what about education funding, what should be done about it? We have a former chairman of the House Education Committee on our set shortly to talk about that, following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we have two guests who are frequent visitors to our program, contributors to our program. Actually, sitting across from me here, I'm pointing my finger at him, is Fred Anton. He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. And Gene Barr, he's the VP for Government and Public Affairs with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. All right, guys. Gene, let me start with you with this. We make a big deal about this June 30 deadline, right? There's an argument now about whether it even matters. I'll ask you, and then I'm going to ask Fred. Does this deadline really matter? Is this deadline important? Why are we making such a fuss about this June 30 deadline to pass the state's
Well, I think
budget?
it matters to people when you look at the fact this is what the legislature's supposed to do. The budget expires on June 30. We have a new one July 1. This is one of those, gee, you didn't get your assignment done in time issues.
Good point.
Clearly, there are things out there that say we can continue for some period of time. This July 17 date, when apparently state employees aren't going to get paid, beginning on that date. Some would argue that's the true date. But yeah, I think it does matter. I think that we've got to get these things done on time. It has some predictability for employees, for taxpayers, for businesses across Pennsylvania. We should get it done on time.
Now, Fred, look, you've been through these. This will be the 7th straight budget that Governor Rendell and the legislature can't get done on time. Is Gene basically right? It really does matter, and they should be doing this?
It matters, and what interests me here is the dynamic of the way this is unfolding is very, very different than it has in the past. With one body of the legislature with a substantial majority, and I mean the Republican Senate, having staked out a position, a very firm position. The dynamic of the negotiations here are very, very different, and I think it's going to make for a protracted delay in enacting this budget.
That's a good point. Now, one of the options, and I want to get to, I know there are a couple issues we want to talk about, the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund, which is something that I know the business community is very concerned about, and the tax situation. But before I get to that, Gene, you know and I know that one possibility to have this drag out month after month is whether or not the governor and legislature just do stopgaps. Just pass, say, okay, we'll run the state, appropriate enough money to get by 3 months, and then 3 months more. We did that in the 70s. It didn't work well for Governor Schaap, and other governors ended it. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, but from what we've heard, not a likelihood. I don't know that anybody wants to do it. Each side has kind of dangled that a little bit. The governor, I think yesterday, said he'd look at it, but I don't know that that's a likelihood. I think that it's more likely that at some point, and I don't know when that point is, we're going to come up with a budget, and I think it's we're just going to have to figure out what that budget is.
But no
and do
predictions.
That for the next
I mean,
year.
This could go into August easily. Fred, you agree with that? It could go into August?
I think there's going to be stopgaps because I don't know really how they're going to get out of this. Now, in the conflicts in the past, at least in my experience, they've all gotten together, the governor and the leaders of both the House and Senate caucuses, and there's been bipartisan votes. In 1991, there were very definite bipartisan.
Both parties put up votes for the tax hike and the budget.
Yes,
right.
so I don't see how the Republicans in the Senate are going to put up votes for any sort of a tax increase. And secondly, the other problem, and the much more severe problem, is where the governor gets votes for his budget in the House. He's at least
20 Democrats who won't vote for a state income tax hike at the moment. The governor sort of admitted that, right?
My prediction is you'll have a stopgap, which will become a permanent budget. That's my prediction.
We've had serious problems with that in the past, and that doesn't resolve. If the economy gets worse and the deficit grows, and the stopgaps are in place, doesn't that put off the inevitability of either program cuts and or some kind of tax hikes?
That's correct.
Wait a second. But the stopgap will be at last year's spending levels.
Yeah, but that won't help it. Gene, Fred makes a great point there, but that won't help deal with the $3.2 billion deficit, will
That's
it?
correct. You still got that out there. And Fred is right. In 91, people went into the room and said, great, we're going to do this. I don't see that happening this year. I think the Senate Republicans have said no taxes. They've really made that abundantly clear. You're right in that at this point we don't see support even among the House Democrat caucus. And to be honest, I think the House Republicans are saying, gee, I hope the House Democrats put up that vote because we'll use it.
I mean, I think for our viewers, you've laid this out now, these options. Prolonged spending stops July 17, is that right? Does all spending stop in addition to state employees? I mean, can they do essential services? Do you all know that?
I think there's still a question there, but I'm not sure.
All spending cannot stop. Let's be reasonable about this. And also, they can't go by July 17th and not pay the state workers. You'll have a riot. I ran the company. If the payroll was one day late, or if the payroll... You'll have a riot.
There'll be some demonstrations.
I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you have them work and not be paid. I don't know how that happens.
I'll ask Ron Cowell about that when he comes. He's been through that as a legislator when he comes on the program. All right. Before we go to break, I want to get the business community has a couple of very important concerns, and I want to give you guys a chance to air their concern. One is the unemployment compensation fund. Why should anybody care about that?
Well, first off, we are $1 billion to $1.5 billion in the hole on the unemployment compensation fund.
How much? Say that again.
$1 billion to $1.5 billion. What I like to call the stealth deficit. We talk a lot about $3.2 billion. Here's another deficit, and it's really accumulated because obviously we have the situation we have with the economy, but in reality we'd be in a bad situation even without that. Over the last year, Pennsylvania has spent more money on unemployment compensation benefits than any state except California. Spent $3 billion.
And so this is a looming thing.
It's here. We're borrowing now from the federal government.
All right, we're going to run to break. When I come back, I want to ask Fred, get Fred's view of that. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Fred Anton and Gene Barr, representatives of the business community, often guests on the program. We're talking about a couple of days, budget deadline comes. The legislature will not adopt a budget on time for the 7th straight year. Gene Barr is talking about this serious problem with unemployment compensation. All right, Gene, you explained the problem. What's the solution?
Well, people will be paying more. I think it's important to think about that. One, businesses will probably have to put more in to save the system. Two, employees who look at their paycheck and see that state unemployment tax will probably see that go up. What we need to do is make sure people who deserve benefits get them. Right now you can collect severance packages and unemployment at the same time.
Right.
We've got to change it. And there's nothing in the state law that compels somebody who's unemployed to go look for a job. Our view is we're happy to help keep the system solvent, but we have to get those changes. So there will be changes that have to be made on that.
All right, Fred, let's change subject a bit and talk about Card Check, the Employee Free Choice Act. It's working its way through Congress. I guess that's one way to put it. It obviously couldn't pass in its form. Our own Senator Arlen Specter is in the center of it. He originally supported it, was a prime sponsor in 2005, and then supported it in 2007. He now says he will support it if it gets tweaked enough. This has become a huge issue between business and labor. Am I right or wrong about that?
You are right, but I think Card Check has lost a lot of its momentum. I think that there are a number of Democratic senators from states where there's not a big union presence, a current union presence, and I think they would just as soon not have to vote on the issue. So I'm more inclined to think it will not come up for a vote.
That's what. Or at all?
This year. I don't think. I think it's lost a lot of momentum now. With Senator Kennedy and Senator Byrd both being ill and frequently not able to be on the Senate floor, and with the one Senate race, the Minnesota Senate seat still up in the air, they don't have the 60 votes or can't muster the 60 votes to cut off debate. So I think they'll take that as the opportunity. I think Harry Reid and I think with Barack Obama's agreement that they will take an opportunity to defer the issue.
And they also, Gene Barr, have this ambitious health care plan and energy both moving through Congress, and there's pressure on the president to do immigration reform. So it's a big agenda, isn't it?
It's a huge agenda. It's health care, it's energy, it's cap and trade, it's the card check. And I agree with Fred. I think that card check, as it was introduced, it doesn't have a good chance. There's at least 6 Democratic senators, probably more, who don't want it. Card check light is still a real threat. There are still people who want to talk about making arbitration applicable to private business, which will cost hundreds of thousands of jobs. So we've got to stay vigilant on top of that. If we hope to have a decent recovery out of this recession, you cannot impose something like card check on American business, endanger the private ballot for workers. You cannot do that and hope to get out of this recovery anytime soon.
Go ahead.
And card check is about unionizing retail workers. Card check is about unionizing the whole service sector. It's not unionizing industrial workers. The industrial unions have all been destroyed by foreign competition. The retail trade has not been unionized, and the retail trade must exist. That's going to drive up the price of consumer goods if they. I don't think.
No, I think you make good points. You know, we've had union representatives on the program, to be balanced and to air all the sides to this issue, and they are really. I mean, this is a huge issue for labor in this country.
It's the #1 issue.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Well, and Fred's right. This is not about the industrial side, because a lot of my larger members who have been unionized for years have said, hey, you know what, we've had to deal with it. This is not about, despite what you see on TV and ads, this is not about Wall Street. It's about Main Street. It's about the small manufacturer of 10 to 20. That's who they're after. It's about the service side. That's who they're after.
I want to get this out because I know that's a big issue between labor and business, and we're trying to be balanced and get both sides of this out. Now let me go to, I want to go back to state government before I let you leave. Governor Rendell has proposed this income tax hike from 3.07 to 3.57. Every recession, Fred Anton, every recession from 83 to 91 to 03, we've had a state income tax increase. Governor's pretty shrewd about this. They're going to reduce it to its old level in 3 years. Will the legislature pass an income tax hike to solve the current budget deficit in yours?
No.
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 No way, no how.
No way, no how.
I don't think so.
Both of you agree.
I don't think that they will. I think that when you go to your point about what we've done in the past recession about raising taxes, that could be a very good tie to why Pennsylvania has typically trailed recovery out of recessions.
Hold on. So what are we going to get then? We're going to have table games at the casinos?
Oh, yes.
Oh, come on.
Not in time for this, but I don't know what they're...
I think we'll have table games without any
video
question.
Poker?
No video poker. Table games. But let me say
tax the natural gas out of the Marcellus Shale, the Severance.
Will they do that?
They'll try to do that, but it's not getting them that much when you look at it, and you're going to wind up hurting an industry that could really deliver for PA.
Go ahead. Final word. You get the final word.
Here is the thing. The Republicans have been very smart about this. They've endured. Rendell's been out there saying, if you don't want these cuts, call your senator. They've been calling their senator, and the senators are standing firm. Now we're going to get the political pressure from the people who don't want a tax increase.
All right. Now I see why we're going to have a stalemate that's going to go on and on. All right. Ron Cowell's on. We're going to talk about education funding following these commercial words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, Ron Cowell joins me. He's the president of the Education Policy and Leadership Center. Full disclosure, I'm on the board of the center, but I don't get any compensation for it. I want to make that clear. Ron Cowell is also a former chairman of the House Education Committee. Couldn't have a better guy to talk about education. All right, Ron, let's get into this. Explain what the current debate is about over the education funding. It's a huge issue.
Sure.
There's a relationship between the stimulus money and what the governor wants to do, and, of course, property taxes. Take it.
Sure. You know that every state budget debate has a lot of subplots to it.
Yes.
One of the most important subplots, certainly last year and this year, has been about school funding reform. School funding is always a major piece of the budget debate, but school funding reform. Last year, the legislature, with the governor's leadership, took a broad and bold step forward, bipartisan support for it. They moved to put into place, with a 6-year plan, a new school funding system that for the first time since 1991 would be a rational system. In this instance, it would be based on the costing out study that the legislature had mandated back in 2006 that was reported in 2007. The debate this year, in its essence, is whether or not the legislature and the governor and state government are going to continue to move forward with this 6-year plan of reform, or whether they're going to abandon it.
Now, the plan itself calls for more state money into education, the purpose of which is obviously to help education, but also to put off or reduce the need to raise property taxes?
Sure.
What's the relationship there?
Let me go back a step, if I may,
Sure.
and explain the problem we're trying to solve. Pennsylvania starts out with one of the worst statewide school funding systems in the country. It's unfair to kids. It's unfair particularly to property taxpayers. We and Rhode Island were the only 2 states in the country that had no system until last year. Right now, only Rhode Island has no system. The state's share in Pennsylvania historically has been cheap. That's the only way of putting it. We rank in the bottom 5 or 6 states in terms of the share of K-12 costs paid for by state government. State appropriations on a per-student basis have been below the national average and below every one of our contiguous states. We're even $1,300 per kid per year below West Virginia.
So what that means is that the burden shifts to the school districts.
Correct.
And to the go ahead, get
Correct.
into that.
There are two results of this bad system then. From a taxpayer standpoint, we are excessively dependent on property taxes. Across the country, about 28% of K-12 revenues come from property taxes. In Pennsylvania, it's all the way up to 44%, almost 45%. That's almost $4 billion a year that we're excessively dependent on property taxes compared to the national average. And because we're so dependent on local wealth, because the state share has not been very great, we have this awful system of inequity across 501 school districts, something that in most states would be unconstitutional. But in Pennsylvania, it's a system that is unequal for kids, inequitable for kids and taxpayers, and simply inadequate in terms of sufficient resources to provide the right kind of education program.
All right, great explanation. All right, we're going to run to a break. We're going to continue this discussion. Property taxes versus income tax hike. What do you think ought to be done? We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. I'm chatting with Ron Cowell, a former chairman of the House Education Committee's President of Education Policy and Leadership Center. All right, he explained the problem. Now let's talk about the real debate in Harrisburg. What's the debate about over education funding as we talk right now?
Well, two pieces to it: how much state money will be used and how the federal stimulus money will be used.
Okay.
You got the governor's proposal on the one hand. The governor has proposed that this 6-year plan continue to move forward and that we honor the second-year commitment, which requires $418 million of new money. So he has suggested keeping state support at a common level, similar to this past year, and honoring the $418 million commitment for new money using the federal stimulus money.
Using the stimulus money. Okay.
And then there are other education purposes for some additional stimulus money.
Okay.
The other side of the coin, which right now is represented by Senate Bill 850.
And it passed the Senate. It was defeated in the House Appropriation Committee along party lines.
Correct.
And it's not likely to be approved by the House.
That's a pretty good guess, I think.
What's in that?
What it proposes to do is, first of all, reduce the state appropriation for K-12 funding, basic subsidy, for the first time in history, actually, and to reduce it by about $720 million, which is an enormous cut. Remember I said we're already one of the lowest in the country. Right. Want to go backwards. And use the federal stimulus money not to move forward, but to replace this cut of state money.
Would that require property tax hikes in your judgment?
I think that across the state, sooner or later, in some instances this year, in other instances next year, it will require property tax hikes. Keep in mind that one of the purposes of this 6-year fix was to make us less dependent on local revenues and local property taxes. If the state's not honoring its share this year and effectively abandons the 6-year plan, because that's what Senate Bill 850 would do, it would kill it. They don't say that, but it would kill it. You're going back to a system that puts undue pressure, undue dependence on local property taxes.
Right. Now, over the years, I know when we've chatted over the years, you've been really critical of sort of the property tax way of funding education. You really think that's a bad way and an inequitable way to average homeowners to pay for schools, don't you?
It's an appropriate way to raise some local money, a fair local share. The problem in Pennsylvania is that because the state share is insufficient, the local share is enormous compared to other states, and they use property taxes, so property taxes are higher than they are elsewhere in the country.
All right. Thanks for coming in. Great update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Stay well.